Welcome to today's episode of Financial Fluency. Today I am here with Michelle Gyimah from the company called Equality Pays. I love the name of your company and I'm so excited that you're here, Michelle. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's very exciting.
Well, it is. Equality Pays. That's a fantastic message. You're saying it so succinctly. Can you tell us some about your company?
Yeah, well, basically, Equality Pays is a gender equality consultancy, and I work with employers that realize that, perhaps it's time to kind of look at the way, the experiences that women are having in the workplace and looking for ways to try and combat some of the problems that women are facing. So some of the issues that I work on are around addressing equal pay and the gender pay gap, looking at the experiences of women in the workplace when they're pregnant, when they're on maternity leave, and when they're coming back from maternity leave. But also I look at sort of more positive things such as, requesting flexible working and how that can work for businesses and for working mums and dads. And for us here in the UK, we've also got something that's quite new that's called shared parental leave, which is quite revolutionary for us, where both partners can split their time when the baby's first born, however they want to split it between them. So that's quite a new thing that employers are trying to get to grips with. And so they're the kind of areas that my consultancy helps employers with.
Fantastic. So how did you get into this kind of work?
Well, basically, I used to work for a large equality body that called the Equality and Human Rights Commission here in the UK, and their remit is to kind of hold government and help employers understand how to implement equality legislation within employment law, because there's no point in kind of pretending. It can be quite tricky, and it does kind of throw up sometimes awkward conversations or awkward questions for employers, and they don't know what to do. And sometimes when discrimination occurs, it's sometimes because they don't know what they're doing. So it could be ignorance. And sometimes, it generally is just, bad behavior, as it were. And so the remit of the Equality and Human Rights Commission was to help employers understand what their actions and the effect their actions were having, and look for ways to try and help them kind of make better decisions, whilst obviously understanding that they're running businesses. So I did that for about 6 years. The work that I focused on was on equal pay and pregnancy and maternity discrimination. So as you can imagine, both quite contentious topics to deal with. We weren't always the most welcomed people in the room when having those kind of conversations. But it was an exciting time. There was a lot of work that went on at the Commission when I was there. Because we have voluntary gender reporting. That was an initiative that the Commission were involved in. And so I did that for about 6 years, and then I took redundancy when it came round, when I was on maternity leave with my son. And I decided, I've really enjoyed the work that I've done, but I kind of want to do it on my own now, and, strike out on my own and see what I can do. And so that's how I ended up with the consultancy that I have now.
So when you were on maternity leave with your own child, how was your experience of that?
My experience was really good. I had a very good employer. I had very, very generous leave as well. I mean, here in the UK, we have, women are entitled up to 52 weeks leave. Now, it's not all paid. Some of it's a mixture of paid and unpaid. And we have the statutory minimum in terms of how much you get paid. And then obviously companies can pay more. And I was very fortunate that because I worked in the public sector, I got really good pay. I think I got 6 months full pay, 3 months statutory minimum, and then 3 months unpaid, which is really good. So I had really good experience, and they were very good at keeping in touch. So every 2 weeks I would get a newsletter through the post to update me about things that were going on at work, jobs that were coming up. And so, my experience was really, really good. The reason I left is because I'd been kind of thinking about striking out on my own for quite some time, and then the opportunity arose, and I was already on leave, so I was removed from the workplace, so it kind of made it a little bit easier. And but all in all, my experience of maternity leave was really good. But in contrast, I know that there are so many women who have really terrible experiences of, you know, being basically left out, or, you know, when they go back to work, their jobs are suddenly gone, or, you know, they're deciding to keep the maternity cover instead of them, or their flexible working request has been denied. You know, there's so many stories of, you know, really bad experiences that a lot of women still face.
Well, given who your employer was, I'm glad to hear that your experience was good. But yeah, I'm sure you've seen a lot of the worst case scenarios too from your work.
Yeah. I mean, it's strange because sometimes I used to just kind of think, you know, but the law says that you can't do this. So I could never really understand, you know, why employers would. But, you know, unfortunately, that's kind of the world that we live in, that, you know, there is rights and protection and legislation, but it's, you know, it's ultimately the responsibility of employers to, you know, to implement them. And, you know, like with everything, you have very good employers who are very astute and they understand the value of women, and, you know, they don't see them as a burden, and, you know, want to do right by them. And then you have employers that don't view, you know, women in that way, and think it's okay to kind of, you know, to see what they can get away with. But the one thing that I really realized is that when you are pregnant, you really do, well, in my experience, I felt quite vulnerable. Even though my employer was amazing, I still had that sense of vulnerability, that sense of, oh, I hope I'm treated really well, and I hope I can keep my job because I really need to keep it. And I had nothing to worry about. And then I suddenly realized, oh my goodness, you know, what is it like for other women who have employers who are generally always really bad, and then they find themselves pregnant, and, you know, they could be worried about telling their employer, or they've told, and then suddenly there's lots of problems. So yeah, we used to see kind of like the whole gamut of things that had gone on, you know, for pregnant women in the workplace.
And I'm curious, since maternity leave in the UK is very different than it is here in the US,
Yeah, very different.
have you worked with any companies in the US on this, or are you mainly UK focused?
For quite a while, I was very UK focused because obviously you have, you know, legislation, and I was very much, you know, well, that's kind of what I have to focus on. But as I kind of started doing a bit more research as to what was going on in other parts of the world, what struck me with the situation that you guys have in the States is that despite the fact that the legislation you have is very different in terms of the amount of time that you're allowed off, it's like literally polar ends, you know, of the spectrum.
Yep.
Some of the cultural issues, some of the workplace issues are actually quite similar to, you know, some of the things that women, you know, face here. I mean, obviously in the UK, we're entitled up to 52 weeks, but that doesn't mean that everybody takes it, because, you know, depending on what your family situation is, you know, some women might feel pressured to go back because they're worried about being replaced if they take a whole year. And so, you know, that kind of ties in with the issue that you guys have, in the sense that, you know, if women only have, I don't know, sort of 12 weeks, that's
I think 6 weeks unpaid. Well, actually, wait, I'm thinking back to when I was pregnant, which was before some of the new family protection laws. Maybe there is a 12-week law now, but yeah, there isn't, the paid issue is often even a bigger issue over here. Is, well, so say you can take 12 weeks of unpaid leave. Yeah. What if you can't afford 12 weeks of unpaid leave? What if you need the money?
Yeah, it's just, I you know, whenever I actually see it written down on paper, I just can't, the mind boggles, because I think how I was at, you know, 6 weeks, and there was no way I was ready to go back to work in any way, shape or form. But obviously, if that's the situation that you know, most women find themselves in, they basically have no choice really, and they're kind of forcing themselves to go back to work because they have to. And obviously that you know, there's so many changes that have happened, and 6 weeks just is not enough time to kind of even get your head around the changes in your, you know, personal and family life, let alone trying to take on being, you know, the employee that you were before. It's the mind boggles. I don't know how you all do it.
Well, especially if you have any sort of medical trauma involved with the pregnancy, which a lot of people do. I mean, there was a statistic that I looked up when I was writing an article about this a while ago, and it was the World Health Organization. I believe it said that 68 women die every day in childbirth and related complications.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that's skewed somewhat towards countries that are less developed and don't have the medical system, and maybe don't have the prenatal. But at the same time, I think sometimes in Western countries, we forget that people do still die all the time. I mean, it is major. So everything from the polar extremes of death for the mother and the child to having a very beautiful, natural, easy birth, there's a whole spectrum in there where both the mother and child may need extra help and support, and 6 weeks maybe isn't. I mean, like you're saying, even in best case scenario, 6 weeks is very short. Your baby can be exposed to things that they haven't had their shots for or built their immunity for if they have to be put directly into childcare so immediately, especially if they had anything like an ICU stay, or a NICU. I don't know what you call it in the UK. Over here, it's the intensive care unit.
Oh, yeah. Same here.
Say they even just swallowing meconium can give you lung infection. So even if there's not a massive problem, your baby could be vulnerable just to catching things in a childcare situation if they're immediately put into a nursery or a creche. You call them creches over there, right?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
I'm trying to use the language of both the UK and the US. And that's a lot of pressure on the mom too, just thinking like, gosh, my baby's so tiny. Are they ready to be away from me yet? Yeah.
And also, I also think, how functional as a person as well as an employee can somebody be at 6 weeks? Because, whether you're breastfeeding or not, baby's not sleeping to a schedule. They're not sleeping all night so that you can go to work fresh as a daisy. Mm-hmm. So, that as well, because I just kind of think, there's, women for you guys, you're being put under a lot of pressure to just slot back into the workplace. And really, it's a workplace that's not designed for women. It's very 50s structure of, this person is going to be in the office for X amount of hours every day, and that's about it. And there's no fluidity, and there's no room for anything other than that. And I just think, that women are being forced to go back to work, much too early, and it causes so many issues, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think over here it causes a lot of women to drop out of the workforce who would like to stay in.
Yeah,
which is a huge loss of talent and resources.
And the message is that you can have a career as long as you don't have a baby, which is wrong.
Yeah. And another problem with that is here in the US now, 40% of households have a female primary breadwinner. So that's either a single mom supporting a family or a mother who earns more than her husband if there is a whole family together. 40%, that's almost half. We're getting pretty close.
That's a lot. And then if you add to that, the issue around the gender pay gap, then that's the massive economic issue, not just, for individual families, whether they're headed up by women or not, but it's a massive, national, GDP issue as well. So it's kind of like, it's basically discrimination, coming at you from all angles.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of companies, though, so I think most people understand the benefit to women and families and children from having fair pay and having fair maternity leave policies and paternal leave policies. I mean, personally, I think that if men took leave the same as women or similar to help offset, if women went back part-time and men were going part-time, or, if it was balanced out in some more reasonable way, it would become a family issue instead of a women's issue, because it is still considered a women's issue. But really, how much do we value as a society babies, continuing our species, furthering our population? Population growth is an issue, and that's a whole different issue. If we value the idea that people should have families, if we like that, then we need to support how it happens, which is women. But for companies themselves, I think the loss of incredible talent, intellects, ideas, information, I think that's a whole other issue too, is that if women drop out of the workforce because of policy issues, they're losing a lot of potential that could be valuable to them too, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I also think it's almost doing women a disservice in the sense that we're telling women, yeah, you can be anything, you can do anything, you can go to university, you can, get, degrees and masters, and you can, work at the best companies. But as soon as you decide you want to have a family, it's almost like, oh, did we not tell you that you couldn't you couldn't mix the two? But the other thing is that I think by cutting people's careers short in that manner, I think companies are missing out on the potential of, who knows where women could go if they were, allowed a much more flexible way of working. Who knows, a woman that could have a baby, say in her 30s or whatever, but she could stay in that company until her 60s. you
Mm-hmm.
know the
She
the
could be CEO
possibility.
of that company.
Yeah, exactly. The possibilities of what she could do are limitless, but it's that short-sightedness of not being able to, give women and men too, flexibility for those core years, because it's only a short amount of time, that you're going to have, a young family that kind of depend on you in terms of time. It's a very short-sighted way of looking at people, because you're basically saying, well, what we want is we want robots to give all of their time from 9 to 5. We want the best of them for 40 years,
Mm-hmm.
as long as they never ever take a break. And that I think is very very short-sighted. And the other thing to think about is that if the attrition rate is so high, where are these women going? Are they going to other organizations that are actually clued up and value their talents and are willing to give them the flexibility that they need for a certain amount of time to get their career back up to scratch? Or are women dropping out of the workplace and deciding that they want to become entrepreneurs because there's no flexibility in the structured workplace? Because I know quite a lot of the business groups that that we're in together, quite a few women will say, well, I kind of fell into this because I needed some flexibility because my employer was being really unreasonable with requests I was making. And so I think we need to be thinking, well, if this is the message that we're giving to women and what we're doing to them, where is that talent going?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I know that in some of the realms that I'm in, which are a little off to the side maybe of the groups that we're both in, because I'm a special needs mom, a lot of women who have kids with high medical and or intellectual need, autism is a big area where if you're doing these early intervention programs here in the US, the gold standard program, it's called ABA, and you often do 40 hours a week of your child doing different therapies. It's not all solid. But living in a small town where I live, where we don't have an autism center, that has meant me either having people come to our house in succession to do these sessions or going out different places. And it really isn't compatible at all with having a regular 9 to 5 type of job. And a lot of the other moms I know too, it's like when it comes down to the decision of, okay, the child needs so many appointments and care that someone has to be there to ferry them around. You either hire for full-time help, which is very expensive for a lot of families, or one parent drops out of the workforce to do it. And when there's the pay gap, like which parent does it make sense to have do it? The one making less. But also one thing I've really noticed is here in the US, we have a pretty high divorce rate. It's gone up and down different times over the years. It's I feel like families with a lot of extra strain on them, both personal, emotional, and financial. Families who have caregiving needs often are families with extra strain on them. When those marriages do fall apart, if the mother's been out of the workforce for a significant period of time caring for the child, not maintaining skills, not continuing education, she's really at a disadvantage. Especially if she is then the custodial parent who's still doing all the things for the child. I mean, often that ends up putting you into Social Security disability income for your child. It puts you onto the welfare system potentially, which also can really cap your ability to then get out of it and earn more money. Because if you earn a little money, you can disqualify yourself for some benefits and services to your family. So there's a gap between earning plenty to take care of everything and earning just enough to make it work, where you can easily fall out of some of those systems. So I see that as a big issue too, is that if you end up being a single mom and you've taken time out, you're so much worse off than your spouse who has continued into in their career. You know, you've missed all kinds of things. You've missed contributions to your retirement account. You've missed promotions. You've missed projects where you could have made connections to further your career.
Yeah. As you were talking, as you were mentioning about the pay gap and like who kind of drops out to take care of the kids if they've got special needs. I was just thinking about pension contributions, because obviously if you're not working, you can't contribute into that pot. But then obviously the statistics show that women live longer than men. And so it's then it becomes that pension poverty, so forcing women to be reliant on the welfare state for longer and living in poverty for longer as well. So, you know, the pay gap and the way that women are treated in the workplace, those issues are so, they're all so intricate and also intricately woven. And I think it's I think sometimes people don't kind of see the dots, let alone connect the dots. And so these are some of the things that I think it's important for businesses to understand, that, you know, the decisions that they make in terms of the kind of policies that they have to try and attract and retain women, you know, they will have, you know, positive ripple effects, because at the moment we're seeing a lot of negative ripple effects. But, you know, have the power, as it were, to kind of make those societal changes and, you know, in effect, you know, economic policy and so on.
You know, I recently had a guest on here her name is Kat Lamb, and she worked for ages in IT and then left it to become a consultant for women in IT at startups and stuff. And I've talked to a few people about this, because here in the States, the startup culture can often be very difficult for women. We've seen a number of lawsuits lately about, not just discrimination. There've been a lot of lawsuits about, you know, actual harassment and the sort of male culture at some of these startups. They get started really fast. They grow really fast. They don't get an HR department. They don't really figure out how to treat employees. You know, they want to put basketball courts in and make it really fun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was wondering what you think about that. Because again, I think long term, for any company that wants to have longevity, I think working women into the overall fabric of the culture is really important. Do you have much experience with this area, the startup culture?
Yeah, I think I've seen those reports that you were talking about, and it's the programmer culture, they call it, I think. I think at first I can see why kind of people fall into that trap, because with especially that tech startup, it tends to be, you know, a few male friends have got an idea for an app or something, and it kind of, the business explodes. But the thing about growing a startup is that, you know, the people that grow the startup, they set the business culture. And the problem with growing really, really fast and, you know, not having advice about how to grow your business is that you can get very big very quickly and have really entrenched problems, which is some of the things that you were talking about, that HR is always seen as a kind of last resort, or it's just before a lawsuit. And so I'm in the process of kind of redesigning some of my programs, and I'm looking at designing business culture in a way that is deliberate, rather than it just kind of mushrooming into quite a toxic one. And one of the things that I'm kind of looking at is helping employers to identify, well, what is their business culture, and what are they looking at, and how are they trying to be inclusive, because that's what you're looking for. You don't want to have people that are like for like. So if you have a Dave and a Chris and a Steve, you're not just going to hire more Daves and more Chris's and more Steves, especially when, with whatever service or product you're creating, the demographics of the people that you are creating it for very often include women. So why should they not be involved in the making of whatever this product and service is? And I think it's about not viewing women as just consumers, but we're creators too. But in order to be creators, we want to have that inclusive culture where we feel, safe and valued and wanted. And it's not just, a boys club, boys club of startups. It's about having, diversity, and not just women, obviously. You want diverse talents. That idea of the startup being, a few guys huddled in a room and working 24/7, that's something that we kind of see here in the UK. But there's lots of work around trying to get girls interested in sort of STEM subjects, but also see working in tech as an actual viable career. And so if that's what we're focusing on, then we've got to help these organizations create environments that girls actually want to go into, because there's no point in equipping them with all these skills and saying, oh look, you can do this and you can work there, and they'll say, well, all they've got is ping pong tables, and they all just go out drinking beer and looking at going to all sorts of places that we don't want to go, because that's doing them a disservice. So so those kind of conversations are being had here in the UK as well.
So what do you think is next on the horizon for this kind of discussion and the work that you're doing?
Next on the horizon? Well, I think there is so much talk about the kind of the talent pipeline, and this idea that the pushback was when people were talking about, the reason why there's not much women in tech is because they weren't, they just weren't out there, they weren't very talented. And that was kind of debunked as a really lazy argument, that actually there are lots of organizations and lots of groups that are educating women in how to code and all different kind of tech skills and so on. And so I think the next step is looking at the culture of the tech world, and not just the tech world, but very male dominated industries where women are kind of leaving in droves, because I think there is that realization that it's about your business culture, and also unconscious bias is something that comes up a lot, that looking at the way that employers behave when it comes to recruitment and the way that they treat women in the workplace. And so I think the conversations are starting to be had, and at first they're quite painful, and people are quite very defensive about the things that have gone on and maybe the actions that they have or haven't taken. But we're starting to see now that sort of very large organizations are starting to say, okay, we've not done very well in the past, and we hold our hands up, but we're kind of willing to learn, what do we need to do? And so we're starting to see those conversations. But another interesting aspect that I think is quite crucial is around venture capitalists and angel investors, and the idea of that diversity having its own currency. And so if you're a startup and you're looking for money from an angel investor, well, you need to be doing your homework as to who you're asking for money from, and what is of interest to them. And so we're starting to see more women in the investing field, but who are asking those questions around diversity, and what are your employment practices, and how are you recruiting more women, and what's the makeup of your board. And so all of these kind of small pockets of interest in gender, I think, are starting to come together in a bit more cohesive way, and organizations are starting to wake up and see, right, okay, if we don't have very many women leaders leadership, why is that? We're not attracting very many women into our organization, why is that? If they are leaving in droves, why are they going? Whereas before they might have been like, oh, that's just the way it is, women just not interested in working here, or they always leave after they have a baby, as if that's the norm. But now we're starting to see, well, actually they're starting to realize that actually there's something that's not right, and it's our job to fix it. And so that's where organizations are kind of coming to me and saying, well, help. Basically, I've realized the error of my ways, how can you help me kind of fix it? So it's about understanding and realizing that there's work to do, and they're willing to put in the work to try and get the results that they want.
As you were talking about that, I thought back to earlier when you were saying, when they leave in droves, where are they going? And I couldn't help wondering about the women who do leave to become freelancers, entrepreneurs, consultants, to work for themselves, because they don't want to return to a culture that is either going to be difficult for them as a parent, or that maybe didn't treat them well while they were on leave, or may force them to return earlier than they wanted to, et cetera. I wonder if there's some way to help with organizing those women too. Because the one thing about it is, sure, having an employer not treat you that well on maternity leave is one thing, but when you work for yourself, you don't really get a paid maternity leave. When you work for yourself as a freelancer, if you're not doing the work, you don't get paid. Sure, you can schedule in your own time off and figure out how to work it out, but you do actually lose some of the benefits you might have had being with an employer. Do you know what I mean? Like if you lose contracts while you're pregnant, or if you end up having needs, you need to be in the hospital longer, something happens, and you end up losing contracts that go somewhere else because they have deadlines, that's a whole different situation than actually being an employee. So while there are some ways that it can be really empowering and liberating and you'll feel fantastic to be your own boss, you are still really vulnerable when you're pregnant, and you may lose clients in the same way you might have lost opportunities for advancement or doing projects in a corporate environment. You may have even less recourse when you're working for yourself. I mean, if a client decides to leave you and not pay you, you can't say, hey, you're discriminating against me because I'm pregnant. They don't have that same responsibility to you that a boss does, hopefully within legal protections, if they're there, depending on where you live and where you work. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because that actually happened to a friend of mine, and she was on a fixed term contract, and she found out that she was pregnant, and so she informed her employer, and she'd done a plan of what would happen while she was on leave. So she'd managed to source all sorts of resources, and then all of a sudden there was a problem with her work, and then lo and behold, they let her go, and she was really surprised, and she kind of thought, oh, well, that's discrimination. And then it turned out that because she wasn't an employee, she had even less protection. And so it is a bit of a culture shock, actually, for women that are self-employed, especially if they've left because they've been treated badly, but they kind of find themselves out in the cold, as it were, because they've decided to go freelance. And so it's a bit of a double-edged sword in that sense that when you have a job, you might be discriminated against, and then when you're self-employed, you might find yourself kind of in the same situation, except you don't have any legal protections. So it is a bit of a tricky one, and I guess as more and more women decide to go into self-employment, those issues are going to come up time and time again, and it would be interesting to see how women are dealing with it, and if there are any changes to the law or to business practices. It'd be interesting to see what comes out of it, essentially, as more and more go freelance and find themselves obviously still having families, but they don't have maternity leave or maternity pay in the same pay protection in the same way. So that'd be quite interesting to see how that pans out.
And I know you guys don't have this issue in the UK because you have universal health care or national health. Here. Oh, yeah, that's right. I did hear something since Brexit, the possibility of privatizing your health system. Is that a real possibility?
It's been talked about for years, but I think there is the worry that it's kind of creeping privatization, that it won't be like it won't come in one fell swoop, but there's possibilities that certain services or certain parts of your NHS might become private, and then it's that creep. It's always been discussed, so we'll wait and see.
That's so interesting. I feel like the example of the U.S. as a failed experiment in capitalized healthcare, we keep hoping that we can creep towards national healthcare. And my kids with having their disabilities are on our Medicaid system, and I love it. Like, if I could somehow sign up to pay to be on Medicaid, I would do it, because it's so simple, it's so easy. Like, before they got on Medicaid, with all the testing, all the stuff we had, it was a mire of confusion of they would go to the hospital once, and we'd receive separate bills for the anesthesiologist, and for the the downstairs operating room area had certain bills, but then when they went upstairs to recovery, we got different bills, and then they would submit them to the insurance. We've done you the courtesy of submitting it to the insurance, but here's the original bill with the original amount, and then I had to wait for the insurance to say how much of it they would pay, and then I had to pay the rest. But there were a few times, because we had so many appointments and stuff, where I got confused, like, with what we were waiting to hear back on, that at one point, out of no desire for me not to pay it, I had something sent to collections, which could ruin my credit. it was a nightmare. And as soon as they got onto Medicaid, if anything that she was, any specialist that she was given a referral to see, we saw, and I never saw a bill. It was just like what needed to happen happened.
Yeah.
Oh, I loved it. That was, before that I wasn't so sure because I'd never experienced anything close to national health. That's my closest experience. And I was like, it's so unconfusing. I don't have to, I don't have triplicates of bills and all these, different doctors who saw her in the same place and charged me for different things.
Yeah.
So I personally would love to have national health here in the US. I feel like there must be some way, and I hope you guys don't go backwards because thanks to Brexit, I don't know if you know, my husband's British, and we have thought at some point we would work on getting the kids passports, British passports, so that they could go to the EU. I don't have a huge desire to live in England. It's a little cold and dark for me being from Arizona. But I always thought, well, someday we could go live in, some part of Europe, but I guess not anymore.
Yes, I know. Yeah, unfortunately, that ship has sailed.
Yeah, I guess so. It's a fascinating time, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's a bit of a crazy time. That just every day, there's always something in the paper, and in my mind, I just think, yeah, for the people that voted for Brexit, you didn't think about this aspect, and then the paper will come up with another aspect that we need to think of, and it just makes me realise that how interwoven in Europe we are, and it's like a messy divorce basically, that unpicking and untangling. It boggles the mind.
Yeah, and some kids wanted the divorce and some kids didn't want the divorce.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's going to be hard. Well, and one thing that shocked me, just to bring it back around to health and women and children, is I remember seeing all of those Leave campaign slogans about money that would go to the national health if you guys left, but now they're talking about privatizing national health, which just seems like such a turnaround. I mean, that's so shocking a turnaround, it seems American to me. Like our politicians do that stuff all the time, but I was surprised to have it in England.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw the posters, I was just so skeptical. I was just like, yeah, the idea that we could save £350 million a week or whatever the claim was, and we'd be able to spend that on the NHS. As soon as I saw headlines like that, I knew that they weren't true. And then obviously, as soon as we voted Brexit, then everybody starts backtracking. Oh, that's not quite what we meant. Oh, or maybe there's misinterpretation, and you're just kind of like cringing. And you just think to yourself, people voted for Brexit, on the strength of that, but clearly that wasn't true.
Well, we have a big election coming up here soon.
Yes.
And we'll have to see exactly when this airs, because I usually record a few weeks before we air. So this will probably air pretty close, in the height of all the election commercial fervor, which I've been tuning out this year, to be honest. I haven't been able to really get as excited as I hoped, especially with a woman running. I mean, my dream of a woman running for president was so good. Like I would love to dream. The problem was not to get too political, but in terms of things like national health and, just Bernie was so nice to dream about, but I really want a woman too. So I just felt so torn with so many things and so confused by Trump. And the U.S. political scene is bizarre. We've gotten way off topic, I realize. But, I just like talking to you so much, Michelle. We should go do a private Zoom after this, and we'll just
We should. We can set the world to rights. That's a thing.
So, usually at the end of every episode, I ask the guest where people can find you if they want to contact you about your services, learn more, read your blogs and articles. Where can they find you?
Well, you can come to my website, which is actually going to go through a bit of a revamp, but my website is equalitypays.co.uk, because obviously I'm based in the UK. I'm also on LinkedIn under my name, Michelle Gyimah. I'm on there quite a lot. So if anybody wants to be friends with me on LinkedIn and have conversations, I'm more than happy to talk to anyone who wants to talk to me about gender equality.
And I'm just curious, in terms of your actual services, is it usually companies who hire you, or if there is someone who's having an issue with their company, do they approach you?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, because I always started off as just working with employers, and my kind of reasoning for that was, if you can work with employers, the potential for change is massive. So I was always kind of like, right, that's what I do. But because people know what I do, I would get a lot of requests from friends and friends of friends and friends of friends of friends of friends. And I'd get, my friends sending me pictures, like screenshots of Facebook conversations. Oh, somebody's having an issue. Can you just, give me some advice? And I was, always happy to do that. And then it kind of struck me that even though there is a lot of advice and information out there, it struck me that a lot of people actually still don't know, what their rights are. And so I'm actually in the middle of putting together a video training series called Get Smart series. And I'm going to be focusing on equal pay, pregnancy and maternity discrimination, asking for flexible work, and shared parental leave. And they're basically going to be quite short, succinct video training on the basics of what those issues are. So things to look out for, what your rights are, and kind of how to navigate those issues. So at the moment I'm working purely with employers, but probably by the time this airs I will have a section for employees as well. So I'm free and happy to help anybody.
I think that's fantastic, because you may also be able to hone in on employers who need you by having the employees contact you. I mean, that's probably a pretty good indicator that there's a problem. If employees are coming to you about the issues for advice, the employer may not know the right way to address it, and maybe
exactly. And it made me feel good.
You need me right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Employees, let me know that you need me.
I won't say which one.
I won't say which one. Confidentiality. But
exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. This has been such a great conversation. I've a few times forgotten that we were recording it and was just going on and on with you.
But it was, it's easy conversation, and I literally do talk about this all day long. Usually when I talk to people, their eyes glaze over. So it's really nice to talk to you and see that your eyes did glaze over.
No, my eyes are not glazed at all. I could talk about this stuff all day long too. So I appreciate everyone sticking with us. This is a bit longer than our usual episode, but I think it's so important. I mean, honestly, this is so much about the reason why I started the show, is because so many things are on unequal footing for women, and knowing about them, watching out for them, learning how to navigate it, that's what we need to do in order to, gain both financial equality and workplace equality, pay equality, all of those things. So thank you so much for joining me, Michelle. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jen. Thank you.